Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Lu Ngo, coming to your ears from NAARM, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Doing Well. And on this week's episode, we are going to talk about nurturing well-being through artistic expression. And joining us in the studio today, we have Emma Noack. Emma is an art therapist practicing in NAARM. Her passion is connecting to people with their creativity, especially trauma survivors, people experiencing anxiety, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Emma has a background in art history and primarily works with clients under 25 privately and in community settings. Her work is individual and in group spaces. Thanks so much for joining us in person today. And it's so rainy. I didn't even want to drag myself to the studio, so I could just say how much we appreciate you joining us in person.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a classic Melbourne day. So,
it is.
I think we're going to have fun today because I'm in a little mood today with the Melbourne weather. But this topic is quite interesting because we don't get to talk about art very often on the show, I would say. And it's kind of like a creative outlet for people to nurture their well-being. And we know about that, but not a lot of people talk about it or actually practice it. So hopefully today, we'll get you to share your insights and get people to help one another, especially because it's so new. So, maybe this is something you can talk to your friends about. That's how I feel what I'm going to do through today's episode. Now, I'm curious about your background because, at the beginning you were kind of saying, I have a very weird story. I would love to hear the weird story because I'm always curious about, why our guests choose the work that they're doing and how they got here in their career. It's fascinating. So yeah, let us know your story.
So I was working in retail. I'd studied visual arts. I'd studied art history at uni. I'd done, I'd started art curatorship. I'd started fashion history. I had started all these, master's degrees and nothing just resonated. I was volunteering at the NGV with their costume collection and at the National Trust. It was like beautiful stuff. Working in retail, I loved working with people and just chatting and being social. But I was like, I don't know what I want to do with myself. I feel really lost. I don't really feel like KPIs and selling things is really who I am. I just want a bit more. I want to do something fulfilling. I want to give back. And I was just super lost. And one of my coworkers was like, come to my family psychic. And I was like, absolutely not. I do not believe in psychics. That's not who I am. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
Anyway, she came back a few months later. She's like, you have to come to my family psychic. And I was like, I just don't want to. And then I was like, how much is it?
Yeah.
$70. And I was like, okay, that's a good price.
Okay.
Like I can do that. And then I was like, that's cheaper than therapy. It was by the Mornington Peninsula. So I was like, if we go to the hot springs, I will go. Like I will definitely go. And I went and saw this lady. She just read me so well. The things she said, I was like, that is so spooky. But she's like, you need to be working with children and art and counseling. And I was like, something about it resonated. I'd never heard of art therapy before. I had no idea what it was. And so I went and explored that. So that's how I got where I am today.
Thanks to a psychic.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for you to have been doing this for quite a while, I'm sure you enjoy it.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so nice. Like watching people making art, you sort of get to see almost past their shell. We put up these big walls. We have to survive. Sometimes we have to be tough. We have to, put on a facade, be happy, be whatever. And then when you see people making art, there's something about their genuine self that sort of comes out, how almost the playful child comes out or their insecurities come out. Your true self when you're making art kind of comes out in a really beautiful way. So you sort of almost fall in love in a very non-romantic way, but like in this other way with who that person truly is, you see a different side.
Yeah. And what kind of art are we talking about?
It can be anything. So you can be doing like, oh, sorry, it's going to be me. I talk with my hands. It could be clay. It could be like using kinetic sand. It could be carving wood. It could be building. It could be painting, collage, drawing. It can be so many different art materials. Like really anything can be art too. Like if I find some random stuff, I'm like, bring that. Someone will use that. Like stickers, whatever, like wool, knitting, felting. There's no limit. Yeah.
I love that. This is a new thing for me because I do think that art is such a big part of my life, but in the sense that, I love the NGV, for example.
Yeah.
Like I go, any chance I get whenever they have a new exhibition, I'll check it out and get inspiration from that. But I don't necessarily, like make art very often. And I'm like, but when I do, so I like calligraphy, and I feel like to me that's a form of art.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it feels like therapy to me. And when I do that, I'm like, oh, this feels so nice because I'm actually connected to myself. Yeah. Now we're going to explore that in a bit because, this is what we're going to touch on in the questions. So we're not going to go into that too deep, but to set the scene for our audience, because, when they're tuning into the podcast episode, they might wonder, okay, so which kind of art are you guys talking about?
Yeah.
So that's really good to hear. Now let's get to know you a bit better before we get into the depth of artistic expression. Yeah. So this part is called Have You Met Emma? We're going to get to know you through some of your favorite things. Now, my first question, and this is my favorite question to ask because I love reading. What is a book that you love?
I love The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I always love that book. I don't know if you've read it.
I haven't, but fun fact, the other day I went to a secondhand bookshop and I found this book. It's a collection of everything that Oscar Wilde has ever written. And I was like, I'm going to read that.
Yeah.
Because, this is going to be fun. So I'm sure it's going to be in there. So, I'll definitely read it.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Like it's about a painting. So, I think it's beautiful. And the Importance of Being Honest is another good one by him as well. Yeah.
Cool. Well, everything would be in that book that I got. So I want to read them for sure. Thank you for sharing. Now, which movie have you enjoyed recently?
I really liked Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I remember a few months ago when I was recording podcast, I remember like 5 of our guests in a row were talking about that movie because it came out that time. And I was like, I hadn't watched it then. And I was like, okay, you know what? Like you guys have convinced me. I'm going to go watch it. Oh man, it's good.
Yeah, I thought it was just a romance or something. I had no idea what the movie was when I was going into it. I was like, I mean, it is a romance in a way, but it's so much more like the rocks and the little eyes everywhere. Like,
and art, that's art, right?
Yeah.
And it's so weird though. The movie was weird, but it's like good weird.
Yeah, I wish I'd watched it at the cinema because I just sort of was like, I'll watch it. I saw it online and I was like, I'll just see what it is.
There's so many parts in the movie where it's like the whole cinema were belly laughing together. And I was like, this is so funny. Yeah. I just loved the ending. Spoiler alert if you haven't watched that. I love that, they said like, I would love doing taxes with you. I love doing taxes with you or something along that line. I'm like,
in another life, I'd love to do laundry and taxes with you.
Yeah, something like that. That's beautiful. That's what I love about, like this just everyday romance or like everyday love or relationship, whatever that might be. It's beautiful, simple.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, we are doing a podcast recording and you're our guest, but I actually don't know if you listen to podcasts yourself. If you do, which one is your favorite?
I listen to one called Ghost of a Podcast. It's by Jessica Lanyardo, who's a psychic medium, animal communicator and astrologer.
Wow.
I'm like, again, like I've gone down this whole new path of life, but it's really great. She has this really sort of practical. She includes a lot of politics and a lot of her beliefs. She'll talk about COVID safety. She'll talk about, respecting other people through, wearing masks or things like that. Like I really love her approach to those things. But also she'll just have like a dog and she'll talk to the dog online, on the podcast. And I just the way the dog will talk, how she'll talk for it. It's just really funny. I love it. I listen to it every week. I've listened to every single episode since it started. Like that's my thing.
Yeah. I mean, I have not listened to that, first of all. Second of all, that sounds niche.
It's so niche. Like, it's so niche.
I was like, whoa, there's a theme, but it's specific. Like, that's so interesting. Anyway, if any people in our audience are kind of like, I'm into psychic and I'm into, like animal communication and all that sort of stuff, you have found your gem. So you're welcome.
Yeah.
Okay. So next question is about your role model. Actually, a lot of our guests have multiple role models, not just one person. I'm not sure if you have multiple or just one, or maybe even none. But yeah, if you do have one or many, who would they be?
Definitely my grandma Flo. I don't know, there was just simplicity to her life. Like, she'd always be knitting, and she's like, I can't watch junk TV unless I knit, she's like, I just have to keep busy. And she always made, she made these socks. They had no stretch in them, but everyone in my family wore them, like we loved them. And she would just eat all the food from the garden. Like, she was just really sweet, simple, nothing too complicated. You had the grandma Flo experience growing up. So like everyone had it. I realized at her funeral, everyone's like, yeah, we all did that, Emma. And I'm like, I thought I was special, but still I was.
Yeah.
She'd take us down the street and we'd go to the op shop where her friend volunteered, and then we'd be able to pick one thing, and then we'd go to the grocery store and she knew all the people there, and it was just a little, small town life. And then she'd get fish and chips on the way back, and like,
Beautiful.
she had a little stroller that she put them on top of, and I don't know, it was just nice spending time with her. She was really, really sweet and simple. I aspire to that lifestyle. I wish we could have that kind of, my grandpa grew everything in the garden, and she would cook. She's like, oh, I've eaten a cucumber every day. There's just so many of them. But like, I love that, she was just.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, definitely. I think simplicity or like, simple ways of lives would be the main things that we have been talking a lot on this podcast, because it's about well-being. And, a lot of the times people tend to overcomplicate things.
Yeah. Life's gotten so busy, and she read everything. Like, I gave her a book about Courtney Love as a teenager, and I was like, read this, Grandma. Like, and she's like, oh, she had a very interesting life, like drugs and stripping and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, maybe you shouldn't give that to your grandma. But she just loved reading. She loved to just sit and read, and things like that I find really I've taken with me.
Yeah, beautiful. Love that. All right. Final question in this part. I would love to know if there's a course you've taken that really inspired you.
That's a good one. I don't know. I guess it depends what you consider a course.
Okay. Well, I would probably say it doesn't have to be like a certification or like part of your uni degree or whatever. It could be something that you learn and it's kind of designed in a way that it's kind of like a course. Because it doesn't have to be like, like this course, like with how many sessions or, complicated. It could be just like a one-day course.
Yeah. I think the only thing I can think of is actually studying art therapy was just inspiring. Like, finally, like the first day I was like, because I had no idea. I was like, I've enrolled in this thing and I don't know if I'm going to like it.
Yeah.
And straight away making art and talking about it and getting to explore it and seeing how it worked, it just changed me. Everyone says I'm a different person since I've studied that. Like, I've grown, and so I think that's probably the course, but that's a pretty full-on course. But yeah.
Yeah. How long was the course?
The master's is 2 years full-time. I did it over 3 years. Yeah.
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 Very cool. Yeah. I love that because, it's very on brand with, your work. And I love that when our guests come on and they're kind of like, I'm asking them, hey, what's the course that inspired you? And then they just talk about the course that led them to their career. And I'm like, that's so inspiring. I want that, like I want to be able to talk about my career in that sense. Anyway, we sidetrack. Let's get back to well-being and artistic expression. So today we're here to talk about artistic expression in the context of nurturing well-being. Now, you're an art therapist.
Yeah.
And you know exactly what we're talking about. But you also mentioned something interesting. You're like, I have a lot of, what did you say? Like interesting opinions about well-being?
Yeah, conflicting opinions and thoughts right now.
Yeah. So what would that be? What does well-being mean to you personally?
Well, I think there's well-being kind of on your personal level, like whatever your level of being kind of comfortable, happy, like content, whatever that is, engaged in life with relationships and things. But then I think there's like a bigger global or community level of well-being. And I think sometimes it can be hard for you to be well if all those around you aren't well, like to just, we don't live in isolation. We do live in a broader community. So when other people have, you know, like after the referendum, for example, like I could really feel that going into work the next day.
Yeah.
You know, going and working with clients, and I was running a trauma group, and I'm like, I can really just feel this is it's really like it's creating an energy. So it's as much as I can be well in my own way, that does change the whole energy and the whole space if other people aren't well, and if there's that kind of shame and that kind of grief going on, then yeah. So I think well-being is such an interesting topic because it's like, are we well? I don't know. Like it's so tricky. Yeah. So I don't know if I have a good answer.
No, it's not that complicated. I think you hit that perfectly there, because I think it's something I've been thinking about a lot. And on the show, we have had quite a few conversations about, let's just say, things like the well-being of the planet that affects us, right? The well-being of other people, of our community. And I think it's so true. We don't live in isolation, and things around us affect us. Like I wasn't that, I would say, involved in the whole referendum thing because I'm not a citizen yet. So I don't have to vote. But if I got the chance to vote, I would definitely vote yes. So for me, it was kind of sad to see the outcome and surprising as well. So, you know, that was sad because, you know, I'm slowly learning about this country, and I'm like, wow, there are so many things that people are dealing with. And, you know, like I think other things that are going on in the world right now, you know, with the wars going on, it's just kind of like, can you imagine how much people are suffering through every single day? And yeah, we tend to kind of stray away from that to take care of ourselves first. And that's what I'm doing because, you know, I actually had another recording the other day, and I was talking to my guest, and I was like, look, my well-being is not that great right now. I need to really focus on it. So I try to not absorb too much negative information. Not that I don't care, like I follow and I know what's going on, but I just cannot care too much because I myself am also not well. And I feel like that is something we need to balance, right? Because there's that, okay, we are living in a community and a society, and we need to balance how we are with how the world is. But at the same time, if we forget to take care of ourselves, then how are we going to take care of anybody else or anything else?
Yeah, if we don't put the mask on
exactly
first and breathe our oxygen. But yeah, we have to kind of find some balance where it's like, we are a human. We're probably going to be a little bit unwell with what's going on in the world right now. That is going to impact us. But how can we show up the best we can?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
absolutely.
It's tough. And I think art is a great way to do that. Like
there you
segue,
go.
but like,
yeah, absolutely. So we touched on that as a misconception about well-being, actually. So I think your definition sort of pointed out a misconception about well-being where people think, oh yeah, it's just like individual. It's just me.
Yeah.
It's not. It encompasses a lot of other things in life. Yeah. Now, what are some of the other things that you think people tend to get wrong when it comes to well-being? Because you've worked with so many people, especially young people.
Yeah. I think people think you just have to be happy all the time, and you can't, you know, like if your pet passes away, you're not going to be, you know, your well-being is going to be impacted, but that's because you're human and because you loved. So, you know, like if you have a disability or a chronic illness, I think you can still have some sort of well-being without being like, oh, you're sick all the time, you're not well. So I think it just sort of depends on what is important to you as well. Like if you're an introvert, maybe you won't have a huge group of friends and be super overtly social, but, you know, if you're an extrovert, you might need a lot of that. So I think the misconceptions we have about well-being is that you have to be sort of like able-bodied and fit and all these things. I think there's different ways of being well. That can work for each person with who you are.
Yeah, I think as you were saying, it's kind of like there's so much to our well-being. It's not just individual, and also it's not about being happy all the time. But regardless, you know, as you briefly mentioned earlier, we can all benefit from art therapy to improve our well-being. So, you know, no matter what we're going through, or maybe you just want to improve your well-being. You know, there's nothing wrong, but, you know, just improve your well-being. I think artistic expression would be a good place to start. So what does artistic expression actually mean?
Well, to me, artistic expression is just expressing yourself and your worldview in some way through artistic mediums. So whatever that is, whether that's writing, whether that's painting, whether that's sculpting, you're just expressing something that's important to you and something you're thinking about. Or because some people would say that any artwork you make is an expression of yourself. It is a reflection of yourself. It's almost, they call it the canvas mirror in art therapy. So it's you. So yeah, that's artistic expression to me.
Yeah, very cool. And with different types of, artistic expression like that, because you say it could be anything, right?
Yeah.
There must be, I think they would impact our well-being in different ways, I would say, because, depend on what you enjoy, right? And depending on how much time you spend on it. So how would this whole sort of like this whole suite of artistic expression medium allow us to change our well-being? Like, how does it actually impact our well-being? And would there be a certain degree of, okay, this kind of art therapy would improve your well-being better than that kind of art therapy?
Yeah, so I guess I kind of see it as an umbrella of like art therapy is like an umbrella of different sort of things. So you can go if you want the most help and you've got like trauma, for example, you'll go to an art therapist and you'll do some one-on-one or you'll do a group focused around trauma. But if if you're like a little bit stressed, but maybe it's not something you want to go to a therapist for and you want to see if you can kind of manage it yourself, like you've got some work stress or whatever, something that's self-manageable, you can do things that are like anxiety and stress reducing, like drawing anything, just doodling, sitting and drawing on a bit of paper is shown to reduce your stress. So you can do things like that. Doesn't have to be good. Colouring in, which I know art therapists can get a bit like, gatekeepy, like don't colouring in's not art therapy, but it is art for wellbeing and is mindful, it's meditative, and it does the brain's alarm system. It helps sort of just soothe and calm that, so it's not going off as much and you're not sort of having really strong reactions as much. So colouring in can be a really great peaceful thing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, each art material activates a different part of the brain. So depending on what art material you're using, you can be soothing that part of the brain depending on what you need. But you can also sometimes it can be like a problem. So some art materials can dysregulate people. So it's sort of it's one of those things that drawing's really safe, colouring in's really safe. It's not that you're going to pick up art materials and have like a huge meltdown or something. If you were going to have a meltdown, you're going to be that person. But yeah, there's different art materials you can use to choose to get into different parts. And I think it's also finding just what you connect with, because we all, you connect with calligraphy. Like some people might find that frustrating. They might want to make more, they might want to use their hands and build a clay sculpture or something, or throw on the throwing wheel, do some pottery.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's sort of, it depends.
That's interesting. So you mentioned that different parts of the brain will be, I don't know the word, like ignited maybe, depending on the kind of materials, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what would be some of the examples for that? Like, because, the brain is an interesting thing. A lot of people in our audience might be just everyday people. They're kind of like, okay, I know the brain. What are you actually talking about?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you some front brain examples because I think that's a really safe, supportive thing. So front brain materials are things like a bit more restrictive. So like pencils, pens, collage, really accessible, easy to use art materials. So that they're really good examples of something that will get you making meaning, metaphor, and it's a more cognitive based kind of approach. Yeah.
That's interesting. So a lot of people in our audience by this point might start wondering, I am struggling with stress and anxiety. And you did say, depending on whether it's self-manageable or not, you can do it yourself or go to art therapy. But some people might also say, well, I don't see benefits of, making art. I don't have time for that. I'd rather do talk therapy. So in this scenario, obviously art therapy exists for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And so how would you sort of distinguish the benefits between the two kinds of therapy? And because a lot of people might benefit from this without knowing, they can even try it themselves, right? They don't even have to actually go to therapy per se. Like you were saying, they can just do that themselves. So what would be the benefits of that compared to traditional talk therapy?
I think it's sort of a bit like, the doing art your own versus art therapist is kind of like going to a personal trainer or just rocking up in a gym and being like, how do I use this weird machine? Like it's sort of, it's if you know how to use it or you've seen a YouTube video, you can kind of try and do a little bit yourself, or if you've got a bit of training, or you can just go on the treadmill and you'll know how to do so, or you can pick up a weight. It's a terrible metaphor. I don't know a lot about gyms, but a personal trainer will really target those things. If you want, a big butt or whatever, they'll be like, okay, let's do this. But talk therapy, it's like, it's obviously great and it's very it tends to be more front brain focused and a top down approach, whereas art therapy can be top down and bottom up. I mean, I know DBT can also be bottom up, but the benefit of art therapy is you can be working from a level where it's more I'm trying to think of the word, unconscious. So you can sorry, I'm losing my words. I say this every day. I explain art therapy every day and I'm like, So with art therapy, you've got the option of not necessarily talking about those things that are upsetting for you. So you can come in and say, I've got anxiety, and I can give you art activities, like a specific process or specific materials. And you can work through that without actually talking, but doing it with an art therapist just boosts the efficacy of it, the benefits of it. So there's that option. But art therapists also do talking, so you can actually do talking processing anyway. So you've got the talk therapy element, but we don't train in like CBT. You would have to do that separately, which is, I know, not the only thing talk therapists do, but it is, it's a very big part of what they are trained in.
Yeah.
So it's just a different option. Yes, and some people don't want to sit and talk to someone as well. It can be really great to sit and have something to focus on rather than sitting and having that connection, especially like teenagers. I find a lot of them are like, oh, great, I've got something I can do. So they're kind of it's almost like a distraction, but it's something that's helping their brain. And then we can sit there and talk and build those connections and talk about those problems. And also you can be sitting and like, drawing and talking about, your mother, and you start pushing really hard and going really fast. And I'm like, oh, I noticed you've changed a lot while you're drawing. That picture, you're talking about your mother and you're moving it really, what's your relationship with her like? What's going on? And you could sort of pick up these really subtle things. Mm-hmm. You can pick up these ways that people do things, or ways that people talk about their art that might be how they talk about themselves. So it's almost a different entry point. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, actually, my housemate loves making paintings. And recently she's been making a lot of those, and she's been dealing with, some mental health issues, and that's kind of like her creative outlet and artistic expression, as we just talk about. And I was like, I look at her painting, I'm like, they're so great. But they're also very niche. Like, you wouldn't see them in like, bright color. Sometimes they're a bit more like darker tone, looks a bit more on the gothic side, but it's so interesting to kind of try and interpret, like what that person is processing, and I'm like, maybe that's what you're talking about.
Well, we don't do any interpretation, but we help people interpret their own artworks. So you can sort of be like, well, yeah, like you're talking about this topic and you're getting really angry, or you're talking about this topic and you're putting yourself down a lot, you're putting the artwork down a lot, or whatever that is. So we can help them understand it, and we can just, sort of notice things like, oh, the head on that is really big, but the body's really small. Like what, and they'll start talking about what that might mean. So we'll help them break that down for themselves. Mm-hmm. But also I think like making art is it's almost like, you might take a walk every day to take care of your body. I think art's like that for your mind. It's just taking care of your mind. Like some people like to do Sudoku or whatever to kind of keep the active brain, or what was the one that everyone was in for a while? Wordle or whatever it was.
Oh yeah, Wordle.
Yeah.
Forgot about that. Yeah, that went for a hot minute. Yeah.
That's good for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, those things keep your brain active. And I think like making some sort of art a few times a week, I think it's just like another practice that would be just so good for people.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But I think the other challenge though, when we talk about artistic expression, is a lot of people might go, oh, I'm not artistic.
Classic. I hear it every day.
Yes.
But the thing is, we're told at some point in our lives, like when you're in primary school or high school, we are told what we are good at. And that becomes our internal message. I was told I was good at art, right?
Okay.
I was told that. My brother was told he was good at computers. What do you think he does right now?
IT?
He does work in IT.
Great.
We've worked out our things, right? Like,
okay.
But we get told these things, and we get sort of told, oh, you're not good at art. But just because you're not good at art doesn't mean you can't do it. I might not be good at yoga, but, I can go and do it and get the benefits from, stretching and the breath work and all those things. But we are told at some point that we are not good at art, and that is when we sort of stop doing it in high school usually. And we abandon that part of ourselves, and we sort of don't connect with it. So then when you come to art therapy, when you're, in a hospital or whatever leads you to me, then you're like, oh, but I'm not good at art. I don't do art. I'm not an art person. You're like, no, we're all creative in our own way. And the thing is, if you're good at art or if you're not good at art, your brain still gets the same benefit. Whether you like eating kale or you don't, you're still getting whatever vitamins kale has, like it's the same thing with art. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I was going to ask you, like for the people that are saying to themselves, I'm not good at art, I don't think I'm going to benefit from artistic expression because I don't know where to start. Like that's kind of like the point for them to actually start thinking about it. But then also, how do we get them to get started? Let's say now there's a person in our audience who's kind of like, okay, I see the benefit, but I just don't know where to start because I just have not done art in years.
Yeah, collage. It's such a good inroad, right? Like you can do it digitally now. You can go on like Pinterest and you can put all these bits together and make like a beautiful, like a vision board or something. It's such a great entryway. Get some old magazines, things like that. And that's a really good way to make art. That's a really good start. Or just doodling, filling a page with shapes and lines, however you want to do that, So that's a good way to start. But yeah, you don't have to be good. I always tell people at the start of art therapy, I'm like, you can make ugly art, you can make good art, you can make weird art, you can make art you don't like or that you do like. Like it's just whatever happens, because you're going to benefit in the same way. And the main thing with any therapy, even though I believe in the art therapy side of people, it's the connection. So if you find a talk therapist who you just connect with and you trust and you feel nurtured with and supports you and helps you develop, that's all that matters. Sometimes the modality is a good inroad. So I've had people who don't really want to talk, they don't know what to say, and they get sent to me, but it might have been the art that helped them, but it might have been me. Like it's sort of, it really depends, but the relationship is what's reparative,
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I guess this is for our audience to explore for themselves. They might want to start by just, getting started on the collages that you were talking about. This is something they can do by themselves in the comfort of their own home. They don't have to open up to anyone. That might be a safe environment, and then work their way up to actually opening up to an art therapist, because I think this is a very niche area. I think we're learning more and more about traditional talk therapy every day, even though it's not that uncommon anymore, but there's still a learning curve, to the general public. It's still like a taboo topic in a lot of countries, because this podcast is, pretty global. I'm hoping we'll have some members of our audience who are in countries that are still hesitant to talk about therapy. So art therapy is kind of like, to me at least, coming from a Southeast Asian country, it's like the next level of it. Some people might go, what? Art therapy? Are you crazy?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? So to me, it's just like, oh, do I even talk to my friends back home about this? Like, do they know about this at all? Family as well. So I think this is a learning curve. So it's a good point to start with your recommendation, I feel.
Exactly. And so many cultures have had art making as part of the practice, in time memoriam, like basket weaving or whatever it was. There's always been some sort of arts and crafts that people have done.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's part of who we are. Like it really is making costumes and clothing and whatever it was, decorating our homes, we've always been creative.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the key point of this, recognizing that we're all creative in our own rights. And I feel like that's one of the things that we have touched on in this podcast before, but now that we're talking about artistic expression, art therapy is kind of like the next level up, because sometimes people are like, oh, I'm just not creative, but then they also don't recognize that they are, and that is actually helping them. So I want to go back to the example that I was giving you about, my housemate, because like she was making all these artworks, right? And we actually had a conversation about, like the pressure that we're both dealing with. And they were like, oh, what's going to help? What do you enjoy doing? And when I asked her that question, she was like, painting. And I was like, okay, do it.
Yeah.
Spend time doing it, and now she's doing it pretty much every other day. And there's always art supply around, and, I see new artworks all the time, and I'm like, this is great. It's like, expression for her, and it actually helps her to process her feelings and emotions better and lift her up. And I'm like, this is good. And now that we're talking about artistic expression and art therapy, I'm like, oh, she's doing her own self-therapy there through art therapy without going to art therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, they've got that character. I've forgotten her name. I'm so terrible in sex education. She's like,
oh, yeah.
She's like, I'm on a healing journey. And
Amy?
I don't remember her name. She's the one who had the trauma.
Yeah, Amy.
Yeah. And she's like, and she's going to art, and she's like, it's supposed to help,
Yeah.
I was like, yes.
Yes. Yeah, the latest season, when Amy was going to art classes, I think that was good. Yeah. It was like the art that she made, I was like, that's interesting. And then now that we're talking about this, I'm processing that in the connection with our topic. I'm like, that's so true, like we just, and sometimes taking classes. There you go. Another way to try if you're kind of like, oh, I don't really want to go to art therapy, maybe take an art class.
Yeah.
That helps, whichever one you want to try, I guess.
And I think connecting to your pleasure and yourself and your self-expression is always good. So whether you do it, some people do it through fashion. They put these, I work with someone who every day she has the best outfit, it's, I don't know how many clothes she has, but that's how she expresses herself. I almost know, like, one day she came in a full black kind of outfit and I was like, you're a bit emo today. Like, what's going on? But like, I don't know if that was her expression that day, but everyone expresses themselves in their own way, and, finding what that passion is really good, because we're living in a time, and I am so part of this culture, but the internet, the Netflix, the TikTok, the Instagram, we're just looking at my phone all the time, so if you can get away from the phone and paint for an hour, like, I think that's such a gain for your brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel that, and you're kind of igniting some ideas in me, because I also love fashion. Like, I love dressing up and, like, putting together different outfits. Maybe that's my creative outlet. Who knows? Yeah. Okay, cool. Now let's get a bit more practical for our audience, because I think we gave them some tips already, but for those that are kind of struggling, we always have a practice part for, just to get people started. So we have mentioned a few things people can try, but if at this point, if anyone is still kind of struggling, what is a practice you would recommend to them? Maybe this is something that you do for yourself when you first started, looking art as part of, your therapy, your healing journey, whatever that might be. And there's something that is so simple that anyone in our audience can try. What would that practice or something simple they can try be?
Well, I guess I already said the collage, like doing a vision board, like what are your dreams for the future? Like, especially if you're feeling a bit down, especially if things like, what do you want the future to be like? Especially like looking at the news, like what do you want the world to be like? What do you want the, climate to be like? What do you want all those things? Or what are your personal dreams? What are the things you need? Making a collage about that is always really good, and putting it up somewhere. I think that's a great start. If you are a bit stressed and anxious, colouring in book, really easy. If you want to step outside of your home, you could go to like a life drawing class. There's some good slightly limited research. I have to say it's not the best research, but about like body image and life drawing. So it actually improves your body image to go to life drawing. It can be any life drawing, but then you get to see a real body that hasn't got a filter on it, hasn't been edited in any way. Even if it is a thin person, you're getting to see a body and drawing it, and it lowers during the periods that you're going to life drawing. That helps reduce some body image issues. So that's a really positive thing, and it's a really great thing to just go. I went to one recently, and it was so great seeing people who had never done it before just being like, look, isn't this good? And you're like, oh, that's so sweet. I love this.
Nice. Yeah, that's a really good recommendation. So this is like probably like a way for people to get started, right? And so many different practices that you pointed out there is like something they can try. Now, if they were to be consistent about this, because some people might start wondering, okay, I'm gonna start making art. How often should I do it for it to help me?
It's a good question. I don't know if I definitely know the answer, but I think it would be a nice thing. I mean, when I was studying every day, I would do a drawing. There used to be research that said drawing in a circle was calming, but now they've realized just drawing in general is. But I used to draw in a circle, and I had a journal where I did it every single day. So I think as a daily practice, it's good, even if it's 5 minutes or an hour.
Yeah.
doing some sort of drawing, you can have a little journal, and looking back at it's really great. And it can be something you do either if you're a morning person, you can do it in the morning. If that's not going to work, do it before you go to bed. Like have it next to your bed and just do a little doodle or a drawing and see what comes up. So that can be a really nice practice, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. So when it comes to, doing all these different things for our creative outlet and, having that artistic expression, I think we mentioned before, it might be really hard for some people to get started, especially because they're like, oh, I'm not artistic enough. Or, like there's just like this mental block that, I have to set aside some time, because everyone is so time poor nowadays.
I know.
So when it comes to those many challenges, what would be the key antidote you would offer to, people, maybe young people you've worked with, like there's something that can get them to be a bit more open about the idea, or just to get that mental block away from, whatever it is that they're trying to do, or just get a go at, what would that be?
Well, I mean, if you feel like you don't have time, I mean, it's your time. You can set the boundaries with yourself. Like, this is my time that I want to spend for myself and my well-being. So there is that kind of barrier sometimes that we have. We try and not go to sleep on time for some reason. We want to rebel against ourselves. I don't know what that is, but I know we've all done it. We're like 10 o'clock, nah, I'll just wait. But I think also, like, if you're struggling to connect to do something and you're like really into Netflix, just put on the Netflix show that you want to watch and just do something while you watch it, and see if you're able to shift, and then eventually not have the media in the background or something like that. Like starting out with a way, like you can have a plant in your room and you can sit and draw it, or you can draw the laptop sitting on your sitting on the corner of your bed, whatever it is. You can sit and find a way to draw, because it's 5 minutes isn't too much. I don't think to take the time.
That is a good point, because it's kind of like starting with multitasking, so people feel like they're actually productive with their time and they're not like doing things they're not enjoying. So kind of like, I like the idea of having that background noise. Maybe some people just like to put on some background music, or whatever that might be, and sort of like do activities that they normally do and incorporate that into the portion of the time that they might want to try art out. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, if you've got a lunch break and you don't have co-workers or whoever, or school friends to talk to, or it depends what you're doing, I don't know, but then you can sit and draw for 5 minutes, because it probably doesn't take half an hour to eat the sandwich or whatever it is that you're eating. You might have 5 minutes to sit and sketch what you see in front of you, things like that. You can find a little way to just set yourself a little challenge. I saw a challenge recently on Instagram. It was for October. Someone had Post-its and they just did a shape, and then you drew that shape on your Post-it, and then you just had to turn it into something. So that's like a really cool, you get a doodle and then just turn it into something, and that would take, less than 2 minutes really.
Yeah. That's fun.
Yeah.
So many things we can try, right? Yeah. So I think I like that, the idea that it's, you can start with something so simple, and sometimes getting prompts would be, a good thing. Actually, that before we close this part, I have to say I found this really weird journal at the bookshop the other day. It's called Wreck-It Journal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, I didn't know this was a thing. And then, like it has all the different prompts, and, like the purpose is to wreck it.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe that could be something people can try. Like totally. If any people in our audience are kind of like, I still don't know where to start, maybe get that journal. That sounds fun.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so we have covered everything by this point, I believe. Okay. Is there anything on this topic that you would like to mention that we probably didn't get to cover?
No, I think that's good.
Yeah. That's good. So, hopefully this is helpful for our audience. And before we let you go, we have open mic. So as I said, this is your platform to talk about anything you would like to share with our audience, maybe something you're passionate about and you just didn't know, where to share it. This is your platform. So go for it.
I mean, I do work a lot. I mean, this is maybe a trigger warning for self-harming. I do work a lot with people who self-harm. And I have made like a little product. You can make it yourself at home. Absolutely. It is on my Etsy, which you can find via my website or my Instagram. But I've made like a little product for people to work with distress tolerance using a little bit of art therapy and a little bit of classic DBT therapy. Basically, it's super simple. You can make this at home. I'm not saying you have to buy it, but it's something I'm really passionate. I do want to say I don't it's a complicated topic, but I don't discourage people from self-harming. I want to help them to heal from the reason they want to self-harm, as long as it's non-suicidal. Obviously, if it's suicidal, you have to get help and call 000 and all things like that. But self-harming is a much more complicated kind of more sort of high risk kind of coping strategy. But you can use DBT. I've got these because when I teach people these coping strategies, then they have to go buy all these things. So I just give them a pack, but it's got like an ice pack. You put it in the freezer and then you put that over your face, and that it triggers the mammalian reflex. So then it's like you're underwater, like you're a mammal going underwater, and your nervous system gets reset. So those emotions that are overwhelming you, gone. You can put your face under a shower. You can get a bowl of iced water, things like that. There's so many tricks out there. TikTok has the best, and they show people who have these issues and do these things, and they work for them. And then I have my own thing that I've discovered works, which is like a tattoo pen. So it washes off, but people will write on themselves and like draw marks and do things like that. And they can find that really self-soothing instead of doing the behavior. And then I have warheads. So they're good on the go, because you can't have an ice pack with you everywhere you go just in case.
Yeah.
So I've got warheads, because that will shock your system as well, because they're like so intense. So I've got some of those, and I've got a little booklet explaining everything around those techniques, and like 1,000 other options in case, some of those might work. So that's something I'm really passionate about, helping people understand those behaviors and heal from them. So yeah, that's something I've worked on, because I've just had so many people who I'm like, I can't send you to the shop to buy a tattoo pen and warheads and this. So I've put it all in a pack. I've made a little zine. It's just like a little funny handmade thing. But yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
It is a hard topic to talk about for sure.
It is.
And yeah, definitely tricky to navigate, but thank you for sharing, and thank you for doing the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
So if our audience would like to find out more about your work, or, find those kits that you've made on Etsy, where should they go?
The Healing Art Studio. It's everywhere you can kind of look. I'm on Instagram. I have a TikTok, but I've forgotten how to log in, and I just every time I try and re-log in, it starts a new account for me. So I think that's gone.
Okay.
But Instagram at The Healing Art Studio, and then my website's thehealingartstudio.net. It's pretty simple, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thanks so much for being here today. Certainly, it feels healing to talk about art and well-being, and I've had a fun time just thinking about what I can try, and not having this mental block that I don't have time for art therapy at home. I do, This is great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
You have been listening to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights podcast produced by the Wellbeing Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website, we.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.